recorded?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have our next seminar by Leonard, Grabow, which you were in Dresden doing a master, doing some work here. So you will also give a seminar, okay, for the members of the group. Okay, so please.
So I will summarize a bit the work I did here the last few months. So first let me talk a bit about the unsaturated zone in marsh systems, which is quite important because of all the oxygen and liquefaction is possible and a lot of other degradation. So it's quite an important fact in marsh, as pointed out by these two publications, for example. And it's not a new thing. Not a new thing discovered by man, but also by like soil remediation, for example, the last 20 or 30 years. Yeah, so I was working with the MAR pilot facility in Palamós. Here shown on the picture, it's on a field scale. I think you all know that site. So let's go more to the technical picture of it. Basically, you inject water here, and then you have a small scale aquifer. And the idea is that the water flows through an aquifer, improves the quality, and you investigate the water which flows out at that site. And the part I'm working in is the unsaturated zone, which is here at the top. It's not quite big. It has like a size of 1.20 meters roughly. You can see it here. And is, for my case, composed of sand. Only sand. That's the idea. Yeah, so that's the basic setup. And understanding that unsaturated zone is quite important for MAR. That's why many tracer tests have been conducted, and also there was already a model developed last year from another master student, Castillo, and it's something I need to show you first because my work follows up on that model. It's in 1D, and it's basically able to simulate the transport and the flow in the unsaturated zone for Palamós using Code Bright. So for those of you who don't know Code Bright, it's a finite element model and it's a huge model. So it can do many things. You can choose between all the constitutive laws and you have great flexibility regarding that. And she was setting up such a model in 1D. Yeah, with the idea to evaluate some tracer tests that have been conducted in Palamós. And with these tracer tests and being able to simulate them, you are able to characterize important parameters in that flow, which I will show, for example, here. So the constitutive equations, we have a two-phase flow. So you have these constitutive equations which are of great importance to parameterize, and basically you're using that model and assuming some values for the parameters to replicate the transport behavior. And here, for example, shown the normal van Genuchten equation and the Moorland van Genuchten equation for the permeability. And you have some parameters you can play around with to fit the transport, and that's what she did. And now comes the data I have been using and was available to me. So there was a fluorescein tracer test conducted. And here you can see the breakthrough curve that was given, and in red the injection period. So you see it's already quite noisy, but we will talk about this later. And another data I've been using for my work is a time series data of soil moisture over different depths. yeah, that's also something I will tell you later about. So, what are the objectives of this work? First, I will talk about the framework I developed for the automatic calibration in code write. Using this framework, I'm able to revise the model of Castillo and do an automatic calibration, sheet it by hand to estimate these parameters, and then also develop a new 1D model to get more insight into the parameters of the constitutive equations. And in the second part of this work, I developed a 2D model and start with some Monte Carlo simulations. Yeah, how does automatic calibration work? So there are many softwares for that. I use PEST. And the basic workflow you see here, you have the model. It takes in some boundary conditions, also initial conditions, but ideally they should not matter. And well, it takes also in parameters, gets you some simulation results, and what PEST does is what a human would do, compare these results from the model with the measured ones and adapt the parameters and do the iterative. And PEST does this in a quite smart way, I have to admit. This is the most simplest case how PEST works. So basically your model is X, it's like some linear model at the moment, which takes in some data and gets you the output, not data, sorry, these are parameters. So gets you the output, and the idea is to minimize the residual between the measured data and the simulated data by minimizing that objective function. So it's basically minimizing the residuals. A very simple thing, and from that you get an optimized parameter set. And also from that, and we will talk about that later, you get a covariance matrix of the parameter error that you can also estimate. So these are quite interesting things. You don't only get the parameter values, but also how they are being related to each other, how they're being correlated, and so on. Yeah, so I will not show you the optimized parameter set now for the 1D model of Castillo because that's kind of boring. Just some parameter values, and they don't fit very well for the new tracer test data. Yeah, but that's not really discussable. What I will show you now is the other model I developed in 1D. Which is basically, you remember that other model in 1D of Castillo, and now I regard a small scale, smaller model, and I'm not using any tracer transport, I use the soil moisture data only, so I basically automatically calibrate how the soil moisture propagates over depth. And because the data set for the soil moisture is so large, I can use many parameters over depth. Before, the 1D model of Castillo was homogeneous, now it's heterogeneous. I can use many parameters, a lot more than the one before. And what I do is I introduce heterogenities and that test calibrate all these different parameter values in each homogeneous field of the total heterogeneity. Here, for example, shown for lambda, the parameter of the Moore-Langfang-Nuchten equation. And yeah, so for example, for lambda now, you get a covariance matrix, which is visualized here. That is exactly the covariance matrix shown here. So you get an optimal set of numbers and how they're being correlated inside the model. So this is nothing new, this does test automatically, and it's something which you just get from calibration. And what I do now is I look at the correlation and how it's developing over distance. So for example, I have the parameter lambda1 and how it correlates with parameter lambda2. That's like some distance. And I take the same correlation coefficient, same distance for lambda2 and lambda3, and so on. So I have, for this case, 4 values of distance versus correlation coefficient. And then I do the same, and I look, okay, how does lambda1 correlate with lambda3, and lambda3 with lambda5? So they have like double distance, and how do they correlate? That's quite interesting to investigate how the correlation over spatial distance changes. Yeah, that's like one outcome of this model, which I find really interesting, and which I want to incorporate now into another model where I introduce heterogeneity in 2D. So let us first look at the breakthrough curve again. That really promotes you of thinking that there should be some heterogeneity, otherwise you would not have these curves. And in 1D it's impossible to make. So let's go 2D. And that's what I've been doing with Code and developing now a 2D model and introducing heterogeneties. And the first thing you will think of if you have 2 peaks, that's the most simple expression would be like preferential flow paths. And the most simple explanation of preferential flow paths are, for example, a bimodal heterogeneity in the end. And that's what I follow the idea. So I was wanting to implement bimodal heterogeneity. And that I did by hand with the sequential indicator simulation and the sequential Gaussian simulation on top. So that's nothing new, that's something you would normally follow. I did it by hand as part of the framework, so not using, for example, SGEMs, so it can be produced automatically. So you could adjust the geostatistics based on the model results you get. You could also do the iterative for the geostatistics. And yeah, one of these fields, for example, you get for the intrinsic probability is shown here for illustrative purposes. And of course, for geostatistics, you have to know some spatial correlation. And there I was thinking maybe to combine it with the spatial correlations you obtain from the calibration. But it's, like regarding theory, not justifiable. It's only to play around with. And here are the first results. I just got them yesterday from roughly 50 runs as a part of the Monte Carlo simulation. And yeah, you really see that it's not being able to produce 2 peaks. That's an issue because yeah, I want to have 2 peaks, but it's not working. And I basically found out why I need like the grid clear numbers exploding. So you cannot really handle this. This is an outcome now I have to accept for this model, right? That I'm not able to simulate this dynamic I see here. So we have it in seconds, and like this, for example, is 1.5 hours. So this is really spiking up. And yeah, so at the moment I really have to focus more on developing model by model, and yeah, replicating the overall shape, but not being able to replicate peaks, let's say, at least not by a bimodal heterogeneity. Another thing I wanted to now start investigating is not only looking at the heterogeneity, but also at the connectivity, which plays an important role when I want to have preferential flow paths. And for that, use different matrices, for example, the Euler characteristic. But there are several others, this is just an example. So for 2D, for my mesh, it's basically expressing a number of clusters so cells which are connected by some permeability, minus number of holes where the other permeability of the other material exists. And it gives you an idea how well the medium is connected. And by the way, this is for one example of permeability I was showing, also depth. So you could also do the same with porosity, for example, or other materials, not materials, but parameters of the materials. And so far, I didn't get any, let's say, any sense of that. So if you just sort or like calorize the breakthrough curve by the Euler number, then you don't see any pattern. But this may change with different parameters, with different geostatistics, and yeah, with that I have to really play around with more. And yeah, then we are already talking about the future, because this is actually just getting started. I spent a lot of time developing just the framework, and yeah, the Monte Carlo was just a few days ago. Yeah, first would be to enhance the connectivity by not using multi-gaussian, but transforming it to other PDFs. And also couple the parameters. So, for example, by co-kriging or using data transfer functions to have some relations between parameter and porosity, permeability and porosity, sorry. And yeah, that's it. And also investigating the relation between what I get from automatic calibration and what I get from the geostatistical part. So they are at the moment very independent, but I want to get a sense of it. And I also want to try out the CTIW and compare the parameterization of C with the matrix of the heterogeneity. So for example, with the Euler characteristic I showed you before. But that's just another sidetrack, and I don't know if I will manage. And thank you for your attention. Yes?
I just want to say something. First, how long have you been here? 6 months? How long have you been here? Maybe before that. And in this time, you have been able to learn how to write geostatistics, and continue some random walk and do Monte Carlo simulations at the same time. So it's really amazing. So of course you have problems. Of course. Now I'm sorry because when you showed me the results 2 days ago, I didn't realize, and now I realize when you were talking. When you go to this one, for example, in one of them, we haven't checked. I didn't ask you to check. I'm sorry for that. About the total mass recovery.
Yeah.
But the second count, I think it's not real.
So this I discussed with Christina, my supervisor. It's a problem in the signal. So not only is the data like super noisy, but also like the area under the curve doesn't fit at all with the injected mass, which is a serious issue.
How much? 20-30% more?
Yeah, I didn't calculate, but you see it's like double the area. So
it's more because then it is impossible to compare with any curve. So you have to do this too. Even if you trust the curve, even if you don't trust the numbers, you have to change the input data. So it's having 50%. You just assume that you have produced injected 150. The other way, you can never compare the shapes of the two.
Yeah, at the moment I'm not facing this issue because I only do it by eye.
Okay, no. Of course, there are still other problems like the double bond, or even the fact about that you start too early. Yeah? That's why all the curves, not almost all the curves, are very, very early. That's also there. So I think there is something fishy with the data. You told me that. But that's an important point.
I did not want to ask Charlie, but I must. And I'm sorry because I'm a very old man. Speaking in a very fatherly way. The data is the last universe. The data may be wrong, but this is the last universe. And it is just a recognition that you are not able. What happens always for everything traces is the calibration curve.
And so now I'm going to say a few generalities about modeling and about calibration. Sorry, because this is a bit apparent on my part. But I have promised myself, you're going to study after what you say, I must. I cannot, there are things I cannot let go and say here in this group's. So, with fluorescent tracers, calibration is very delicate. And the problem in particular in this case, this is the first time I see this curve. I did this first, I have not seen this curve. So, but this is what now, this is another thing, is that in this particular, I assume you're looking at the fluorimeter in the oblique.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there was a lot of suspended matter there. And that's why if you calibrate it with a curve without suspension, and then it's going to be.
That's the measurement point.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Sorry, I didn't mention it. So the tracer was injected.
So this is the first issue, but this is irrelevant. So this is a matter of saying, you only question the data in the and here clearly there is a problem with the calibration. Because it was calibrated and the condition is very different from what was used. However, what I wanted to assume more is your modeling procedure graph. I don't agree. It's not that I don't agree. I disagree radically.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
When you do a model, the parameters are the least important. The parameters are just tweaks you do to get a good fit. But that's the main goal of the model. Actually, models can be done with two goals, and solely with two goals. One is to integrate data, or two, to understand it. So when you don't get a good fit, it means that your understanding, your integration are not correct. And then the most important error there is if you don't get a good fit, you change your model.
Yeah.
So this is the item. You never use a model you don't understand.
Sorry?
You never use a model you do not understand. Because clearly, I mean, we have calibrated curves like this, and believe me, if you calibrate that curve with Geochemistry, we have a paper from, I believe, 1996, so it is almost 30 years old, in which we show calibration of one curve like this, with two different models, and show that you can calibrate it with a CDR type model, but the average you may get a prediction of a factor of 1,000. And this was for nuclear waste disposal, where you calibrate the model for tests last months, and then you want to make predictions for 10,000 years. So the differences in the long-term predictions you get depending on your conceptual model to begin with was about the factor of 1,000. Medina and Cabrera, 1996, at my point, the one I want to emphasize, and the one I want to emphasize to you all guys, the message, when you don't get a good fit, you question your conceptual model. It's not that you change the parameters or you go from 2 to 3 dimensions. There is something wrong with my understanding of this. How do I have to change my understanding? In this particular case, CDR probability is not going to work. However, don't believe what I say is not going to work. Try to understand CDR to see why it is not going to work here. This is the goal. The issue of models, as I say, and this is the other message I did not want to go and challenge. And I would not have said anything if it had not been for Chinese intervention. It's understanding. You use models to understand your data, to understand your system. Focus on that more than in fitting the curve, or than in seeing that those parameter correlations are absolutely artificial. Those are a property not of the natural medium, those are a property of the calibration procedure. The calibration is a tool. So if you, when you a screw to fix a machine, you don't want the properties of your screwdriver. What you want is to fix the machine, to understand how the machine works. So So looking at those relations is looking at the properties of the screwdriver, which has nothing to do with your it's properties of your screwdriver, not properties of the machine you're trying to fix. So that is, I guess, the message. The first thing is question the conceptual model. Second, try to understand the models you use. And third, concentrate on reality rather than on the properties.
Yeah, back to the first point you mentioned. I adapted it also that it can use different constitutive laws because copyright can also. So that's a beautiful thing about copyright. You can you're like really flexible regarding your model. So the framework in Python now is also able to change the laws, for example. So this is something which is usually done in hydrology a lot, but not in hydrology. It's being done a lot because you have different laws for different effects you're observing, but not so much in hydrogeology I observed. So yeah, there's not so much yet implemented where you really question the conceptual model of the laws you're using. But for hydrology, it's something really common. For example, raven.
In hydrogeology, the same. What was my criticism?
Yeah.
Were not question. And changing the conceptual model is not changing the characteristics. The one you were using here, when he described his model, he said, well, all I did was introduce a little bit of curvature. Basically, the point he was trying to make is that all retention curves are very, very similar. And you just take this law or whatever. And that has, I mean, you could almost use it without calibration. But basically, by knowing the material is sand, is whatever. In this case, we know it has a very high retention and low suction. In fact, ring magnetic curves is not a good curve. Neither rings nor the standard. But this is more of a conceptual model decision. Hydrologists, like hydrogeologists, to me, hydrogeologists is a subset of hydrologists. We are not different clubs, we are the same club. Even though surface water hydrologists were down at us, we are the same club. And the whole thing, I would say, for groundwater, sorry, the conceptual model is even more important for surface water, because we don't see it. In surface water, you see it. It's like some states, there are things you don't see. In groundwater, we don't see anything. So everything we have to believe. And I am glad that we are discussing this here, because we tend to put the emphasis on the program, called right, on the retention curve, back and forth. Neither called right nor back and forth. The important is your concept.
Do they already exist? Do they already exist, these programs which, let's say, try a different conceptual model in calibration?
I was telling you from 30 years ago.
30 years?
I gave you a site from 30 years ago. This is sure like this were calibrated. In that case, it was 3 years conceptual.
Okay, fine. Maybe you can tell me later the.
I mean, it's the standard. I mean, the code we were using in that case was transit, which is the standard code we use in. But what I'm saying is that you can use those three conceptual models with color bright, with transit. The code is not important. The important thing is how you represent your understanding you can post. So the thing is not that you use black and decker screwdriver or screwdriver from another brand, a different concept, just different brands of screwdriver. Is whether the problem you need to solve is with the screwdriver or with Palamós.
Speaking of that, can I ask you a question? So, as Xavi said, you've made so much progress in your first half of the year. It seems you realize it's hard to produce a breakthrough curve with two peaks, right? At least using the conceptual, the physics that you're using in your models currently and the structure you're using in your models currently. So my question to you, maybe first a comment, do you think continuous time random walk will get you there? It's kind of a loaded question.
So, yeah. To be honest, no.
No. So here's my question then. What do you think it takes to produce a bimodal breakthrough curve? number one. And number two, and this is an area of research, right? This is a whole area of research. And number two, have you also considered or thought about whether that bimodal peak could have been due to, Jesus said not to question the data, but a lot of times when I've seen bimodal breakthrough curves in my data, I have an inlet curve that tells me if my pump sputtered and I actually put in a bimodal breakthrough curve. Do you have confidence that what you put in was truly a boxcar? No, I guess it's a big two-part question.
I didn't say that for other students. I didn't. I say.
It's just you.
No, but this is important. Because I say, you think that the data is wrong after 6 months of trying is cheating. No.
But pumps are challenging.
I know, and I told you what is the problem with that and why you're, in fact, I already give you a clue why your data is the way it is, why you don't have a mass balance. Always, by the way, this is the first thing to check. So I know, because I participated in this test. What I was saying is that resorting to say that the data is wrong is the last thing. This is first example of the data.
Yes.
Well, either way, do you have inlet data you can use so that you have an inlet and an outlet breakthrough curve? Or is there only one measurement downstream?
So far, there's only one.
No, there are many.
Okay.
There are many.
Here we go. Yes. Yeah. So I'm only. I don't have the overview what exists. Like I only got these curves.
Have you thought about using the other breakthrough curves to get a sense of whether there was a double peak earlier in the flow field?
No, I would consider it, of course, if I have other data. I mean, there have been also other tracer tests conducted. For example, the one Castillo was working with, she used different tracer tests, so not fluorescein, but rhodamine, I think. So this would be also really interesting to see and to also implement.
I think it might provide some clues and insights.
Yeah, for sure.
And then related to that, what do you think you're going to have to do to get, let's trust the data now. What do you think you'll have to do to get a bimodal breakthrough curve? Do you have any clues after Jesus' discussion about conceptualizing the model or your own experience playing with this conceptual framework? What do you think it's going to take? It's a challenge, by the way.
Yeah. At the moment, it seems an American challenge. So I think with the conceptual model, it's possible to make this, but not with the numerics. Like we go back to the implementation. I could produce preferential flow paths if I would only adjust, for example, the permeability field in such a way that one is writing later than the other one. But numerically, it's very hard because you have you have a high peak of concentration, so you have basically only advection, no dispersion on that time scale. At least for me, it was not possible to fix this.
The times I've seen two peaks in my data have been channelized, bifurcating types of systems with very different effective travel times in the different branches.
Yeah.
So like karst, for example,
Yeah.
or stream groundwater interactions and branching stream.
So that we could also do, like using karst simulator.
Yeah, but do you have enough sensitivity, especially
So you have groups in there because it's where you maybe you have groups of the plants that they are.
Yeah.
Maybe they can. You can just.
There are some rules.
But if you have too many, it's gonna start to blur you into one heavy tail again, so it's.
Yeah.
But it could be, you think it could be heterogeneity in general, whether it's by roots or
Yeah.
by the
That's what I would say. And like was just answering your question if it's possible. I think it's possible. If it makes sense, it's a different story. But it's not even possible because of numerics, but regarding the physics, it should be possible.
Good job, you've done a great start.
Thank you. Rodrigo?
Well, thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering about the software part. This framework you explained for the automatic calibration, how maybe you can explain a little bit details of
Yes.
the software part of this implementation.
Well, that's a good point because I forgot a bit to advertise it because I think it's of great use for any other people here. So it's basically a framework which creates models for code write, Python-based, and also evaluating the output of code write, Python-based. So you basically can automatically change everything: the mesh, the constitutive laws you're using, the parameters you're inputting. So for now, I only change the parameters, but you could also use, for example, as part of the DDS algorithm, different constitutive laws, or use a different mesh, adapt the mesh size continuously, look how it converges. So yeah, I didn't find it before, and Olivella also told me that there's nothing like that, so I had to implement it.
All right.
And I think it's quite worth using it for code at least.
So this would be a sort of flow by for code write.
Yeah.
Like flow by for code write.
And not really, there it is a user interface, more than
Yeah. And the other question there was, so you were running code write on Linux or Windows?
Linux.
In Linux, so you compile the code and it worked, okay.
Yeah, it's hot one, and you can compile it.
All right, great. And all of the best calls, the code write calls, all of it is handled by Python.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Could you describe again this Monte Carlo simulation procedure that you use?
Yes. What's a good example? So I do geostatistics, and I don't know if you've heard about the sequential indicator simulation or only simulations. Okay. So that was the problem. Basically, well, you populate the mesh with different values of the parameter you want to model in geostatistics, and you use let's say statistics for that, assuming that they are spatially correlated, and basically for each run you create a field of these parameter values.
But do you create them like randomly?
You create them randomly, but they have some moments you define.
So they follow a certain probability.
They follow some statistical moments you let them to have. And in geology, this would be, for example, spatial correlation. So, for example, if there's high permeability field, it's more likely that in the near there's also a high permeability. So, kind of like that, you define it by a variogram. And there are like many techniques, but that is one I followed now, a very simple one. And yeah, have you heard about kriging?
Yeah, I know the very basics.
Yeah, so it's using kriging. Okay. So in the Monte Carlo simulation, for each run, I implemented a different field. So this is one implementation, but there's another implementation which looks a bit different. This is based on a random basis, going from a marginal distribution, and then like populating the rest based on kriging. So
Okay. Yeah. So here the domain of values that you take for the intrinsic permeability is arbitrary, I guess. You fix that.
sorry.
So the domain of the range of values of the intrinsic permeability, you fix that, I guess.
Yeah, so you have a mean value of permeabilities. So this is your statistical moments you keep. And yeah, then for this case, I had two mean values. because I want to simulate, let's say, by model distribution of the parameter value.
Because I noticed that here we only, or I at least I only see blue and yellow.
Yeah, so
So
these
there
are,
are no greens, no purple.
yeah. So if you look close enough, even within this field, it varies a bit, but not compared to these two materials. So
There's no rings.
No, this is the indicator simulation.
this is already both.
Yeah.
So this is populated, but
I thought the same thing. I thought
Yeah,
it
okay.
was only the indicator.
so yeah, basically this could also be indicator because you don't see a difference, but like once you populate the indicators, so with indicator I mean that you have either that material or the other material, that's what you're doing first. And then within the material field you simulate how the material varies also.
And that's the Gaussian simulation.
That's the Gaussian simulation, exactly. And so you assume that it's Gaussian, which is also
How it's smooth, I guess.
an assumption.
Like a smooth
And
distribution.
to use grading, for example. So it's like you basically draw always from a multivariate Gaussian distribution. So it's a conditional like distribution you get. So given some data points, you want to get the next data point. And together they form a multi-Gaussian distribution, and you basically draw from that distribution, giving the data points already simulated.
Okay, thanks.
It explains a bit.
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
going back to the conceptualization behind what you need to get these kinds of double peaks. I mean, there are different ways, depends on the system and everything. I think it's worth commenting. Do you understand, do you know why this kind of recipe will not give you the double peak?
Yeah, I think because the contrast is not big enough.
I don't think it's so. If I'm thinking right
The contrast is not big enough between the different.
between the two, so I don't think it's. I think the problem is not this, it's the spatial structure, right? So when you're using these kinds of Gaussian fields and Gaussian correlations, you typically will get, structures on a certain size, order, and organized in a certain way, right? So what I mean by structure is the size of your clusters of low permeability or high permeability. So this kind of clustering is not going to give you the kind of channeling that.
Yeah.
So to explain a bit better, so what happens is, imagine that you're injecting from the top of this picture, for example. If you have these kinds of structures and you have enough space, what you're going to get is that when you inject, stuff is going to go more or less through the same statistics of things wherever you inject. So by the end, the time you get to the end, all your trajectories are seeing more or less the same thing. So that's not going to give you all that, right? Like you're not going to get these trajectories that are super fast and these trajectories that are super slow. You're just going to get trajectories that are slow sometimes and fast sometimes. So you're going to get a bump with some variability. I think conceptually that's what's missing there, you see?
That's what I also thought, and that's why I tried also just to implement one channel.
Mhm.
One very, with one material which flows very fast.
Yeah.
And the other one with the rest, which is very slow.
Yeah, this will work, right? This will give you.
This should work. And it didn't work.
This will give you a picture and a picture. If
Yeah.
that doesn't work, then you have a numerical problem.
Yeah, that's my
Because-
numerical problem. That's
Well, okay, no, unless the two channels are talking, if they're talking, no.
no, I introduced the anisotropy, so they're not talking.
So you have no,
Let's just slow
no
down.
dispersion in this direction, it's just for the.
Only that.
Yeah, okay, so there I would call that the numerical problem,
Yeah.
right? Because this should give you two delta peaks, right?
Yeah, I thought.
One channel won't do it, I don't think.
No, two channels, one by the other.
To one way either.
Well,
Well, it's not by moment, and it's at least very moment, at least.
But you should get the two peaks.
No, but let me insist on what you said, because what Thomas has said is extremely important. So I want everyone to keep it here in mind. Because what he says does not apply only to this case, applies always. In my experience, always. Multi-Gaussian simulations are not good at reproducing geological activity. In general. This is a statement I make not once in my life. I have you have to introduce a setup, yeah? You have to introduce faults, you have to introduce, I mean, everyone has to some through the Monte Carlo. I don't know, but I think in this case, you never in your life are you going to find a more homogeneous material than the one on which this treasure. This material was done by hand, we mounted with this mounted, we see it's perfectly homogeneous. So the problem is very special. The problem we have, which is also universal for unsaturated problems, is that the top layer, which what the last is fine sand, is less permeable than what is below. And therefore, it is physically unescapable that you're going to have fingers. So, infiltration is going to be driven by finger instability. Now, Richard's equation, which is the equation that got it right, and all unsaturated, what is the one and the... Well, no, soil is different, but hydros. I mean, all these codes solve Richard's equation. The Richard's equation cannot reproduce. It's because I'm fingering. You know, I mean, what happens is, if you imagine that you have a bunch of sand and you put water. It's not going to go uniform. It still goes with some fingers because the way to dissipate the least energy, you use the energy minimum principle, is have all the water to go through filters. Now, which this is frustrating. Oh, on the contrary, that simplifies your life.
I was assuming like steady state flow, so they told me they've been flowing that fields for few hours before, so it was steady state already. So like any fingering should have been way.
No.
The transfer.
The transport
It's not transient.
Doesn't have to be trans.
It's a transfer.
On the contrary, in this case, we know that the figures, we know the figures. We have visualized those figures. And we know they evolve all the time. Because where you have all the water flowing, you have a lot of biofilm growth, biofilm clogs, so the water moves to another figure. So, and we know these dynamics. But for the duration of your scheme, you can assume steady figures.
And the fingering doesn't change?
It will change, but not at the scale of your test. It changes, I mean, we are not sure which scale it changes, but it will be more like 7 weeks. Yeah, they change because the medium changes itself, because you have, and this is wastewater which is being infiltrated there. It's very reactive because so you have biofilms growing and they clog. So if the water flows through here, this is what you have all the nutrients. The biofilms grow there, and then the water has to go another way. And we are not sure at which scale. We have not been able to monitor the fingers at sufficient spatial temporal resolution. But we know they change. Because we do geophysics, and visualize the figures, and they change, but I don't know how fast they change. But certainly not within a few days, a few hours. In this case, I guess that there was something for 2 days or something. I don't remember the first analysis. By the way, it's not too fast, even though you see 32. It's like history that we're looking at that.
And it was just the simplest. That was just the simplest approach I was trying to follow. The two paths, but yeah.
Okay, the point is, that's all. I don't want to say more because I feel bad. It looks like I'm criticizing you, and what I want is to transfer a few messages. So. In the end, you have to certify mass balance. And all the matter that enters comes out. And all the porous medium, essentially, even when you have fingers, all your porous medium is visible. So another basic property is that the mean arrival time of your curve has to be the volume of water in there divided by 3. That's why I say at least you need 3. That's very clear, those numbers, at least. And probably, I mean, if I were to calculate that, I would use 4. And there is nothing dishonest of that. Even though, I mean, you have so many parameters, that the problem is the calibration itself is irrelevant, because the parameters are going to mean nothing. What is important is what you learn from that, about the system and about the reactions that is there, and your understanding of flow through this extremely complicated. Believe me, you will never in your life find another meter more complicated than this.
Parameters, but maybe not in flow, let's say.
Huh?
In parameters, it may be very homogeneous.
In what?
In parameters, like intrinsic permeability. But in the flow, it can be unstable with these fingers. And in that sense, it's more heterogeneous, I guess.
Any other questions?
Okay, so
I was just gonna make another quick comment. It's a much simpler thing also. It just occurs to me that if you're not seeing the breakthrough curve with two peaks for the simple case, it might be just because since you have just exactly two values of velocity, if I understood correctly.
Sorry?
You're just flow, right? Like there's no dispersion or anything that isn't.
Which one?
In the simple case where you try to look at two channels one by the other.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I have also this problem.
You do in the longitudinal direction, yes?
Yeah, I have to do. I cannot only have the reflection.
Okay, then I take out my comment. Forget it. It was just a numerical thing that I thought might be happening to you, but it's not the case.
Yeah, it's the big key number, the big key number. Which is the problem.
But then you just need a slow tensor.
Or like a better, like good.
Or a different grid resolution. Often it's actually the other way. You need a coarser grid for a given tensor. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
I saw for the key numbers only
So-
grid.
What happens is that you typically go unstable if your grid is too fine for your time step. So if over one time step will be affected over multiple grid cells,
Yeah, that's the
this tends to make you this is the Coulomb number. But that's often what blows you up to be.
Yeah, the column number I fixed.
So this is okay.
This is okay, but the key number not so like that's delta x.
Yeah, then I suppose you need a final
Infection.
I'm not sure that's the problem, but maybe could be. Okay.
Yeah, there were at least some oscillations, I think.
Yeah, so that's classical instability, but but never. What I was going to say was not because forget it.
But thank you.
Okay.
Leo, maybe what you can do is you can analyze the breakthrough curve without doing anything, right? Just by the shape of the breakthrough curve, you can get the parameters, assuming you have a double porosity system or something.
Yeah.
And maybe this can give you some clue of what kind of heterogeneity you should have. No? Because, I mean, you try by model, but of course, what is the proportion of 1K or how do they have to be connected or so?
I was,
Maybe.
let's say, parameterizing the geostatistics by that. So, what did you mention? There was first fitting that code with the normal ADE, and then that code with the ADE, got the parameters, and then I combined them. I said, okay, one material has to experience that, and the other material has to experience this code. It's quite interesting that it's still so early then, if you combine the two.
Okay, that's it. Okay, thank you very much.
The injection, the injection is
Discussion.